What's a prologue and do you need one? I'm Karen Beery with Right Now Editing, where we turn good manuscripts into great books.
And I'm Peg Thomas, award-winning author and editor, and we are two editors for 5 minutes.
Now, if you're on Twitter or X, you may have seen the drama around prologues. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about this. Yes, you may notice that I am nearly bald. I grew my hair out always with the intention of donating it. It was finally long enough to donate it. So over this weekend, it disappeared. And now over the next few months, you'll get to see what I look like in different phases of hair growth. But enough about that. Peg, we've got 5 minutes. Let's talk about prologues.
Yes, let's talk about prologues, because no matter what anyone says on Twitter or X, there are times when prologues are very appropriate. Personally, I'm not a big fan of prologues, and mostly I'm not a fan of them because they're used inappropriately. They're used as an information dump, or they contain spoilers. So often when I read a book, pick one up off the shelf, read it, there's a prologue, I skip the prologue, go right to chapter 1, because I don't want to read spoilers. And then I'll read it if I feel like I need to when I finish the book.
In all honesty, and I'm not saying this just to be dramatic, for the hundreds, thousands of books that I've read in my adult life, I can only think of 2 books that I've read in which the prologue was not only necessary, but it added to the story. In one, it was a fantastic thriller in which the POV character, you were led to believe that it was one character, and you didn't find out till the end of the book that the prologue was all actually written in a different person's point of view. It was completely surprising, but everything fit, and it really added tension and suspense to the twist at the end. The other one was a book that I edited in which there was a time gap. And again, I'm not a huge fan of prologues, but as we were working through the editing process, something felt off about starting the book and having a several month time gap between chapter 1 and chapter 3. But then the rest of the book was happening on a day-to-day basis. And it occurred to me she'd actually written a prologue. So we went ahead, we put it in there, and the book did great. It was a necessary and very relevant prologue. But one of the things Peg and I have noticed works well is that the prologue can't be an information dump. It has to be a scene. What kind of scene, Peg?
Oh, it has to be a scene that the reader needs to know. And I have an example from one of my books. Maggie's Strength is book 2 in my Force of Refuge series, and it starts with a prologue. Yes, me, who doesn't really like prologues, put a prologue in my book. But I did it for a reason. Maggie's story starts when she's age 12 with a very traumatic event on the American frontier. And I felt like it just wasn't going to work as backstory, because the emotions of the scene needed to be written out. The reader needed to experience this with Maggie. But then there's going to be this 8-year gap before this story of Maggie comes to, really starts to begin for this book. But they needed to understand the scene. So I wrote the scene as a prologue. And then 8 years later, we pick up at chapter 1, and it works. I've got a lot of reader feedback of how people really, really like that. It connected people to Maggie right away. They didn't have to wait around to find out what had happened to her. They had experienced it with her. They had gone through the whole heart pumping, the whole thing. It's a very intense action scene. So that worked very well. And I have another book that I have coming now that I'll be writing this summer, where it's the 3rd in the series, and I'm using a prologue again, a very short prologue, but it is a scene. And it's a scene that connects book 1 with this book 3, throwing in a twist people didn't see coming. I know my script partners were screaming no at me after they read it, because it brings this character from book 1 back in. Something completely unexpected happens, and it's going to be in that character's point of view, who then is not a point of view character in the rest of the book. So there's a little bit of a twist in that too. But that scene needed to be shown from his point of view because it sets up what's going to happen later to a different character in book 3.
So it provides context. It's not about providing information. It's not about providing backstory. It's about providing context for the book that you've written.
Exactly. And it has to be relevant. It's not just something to tickle the reader to come in and read the book. That's not what you want to do. Never. You want to hit the reader hard right from chapter one with good, solid writing. You've got your hook, you've got everything there. Prologues, use them when you need them, but use them only when you need them.
And you've heard it from both of us. We're not huge fans of prologues, but some books need them and some books benefit from them. So please, if you saw on Twitter or X that prologues aren't needed, that people don't read prologues, that you should cut your prologue, don't do it. We're giving you very general information that obviously doesn't apply to everyone. We've not read your book. We don't know your story. We can only tell you that if your prologue is just an information dump, it's probably not going to work. But get some professional opinions, and we are done. So I'm Karen Berry with Right Now Editing.
And I'm Peg Thomas, and we'll see you next time.